the journey of reaching your dream job is not finished just because you have a contract. It is finished once you are in a seat where you feel satisfied.
It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. I'm your host, Sean. Visit the website, thegermanyexperience.de, or email me if you want to get in touch, info@thegermanyexperience.de. This week, we are going to be looking at the first 6 months of your job, usually the period known as Probezeit. And Lisa Janz, job coach Germany, is going to join me to discuss that. But before we get to that, I want to mention I had some new supporters on Buy Me a Coffee. I have a Buy Me a Coffee link where you can donate to the show if you like it, and the money goes towards keeping the show running. And I've got 2 new supporters that I want to tell you about. First of all, previous guest on the show, Beth, supported the podcast, and she left me a message. She wrote, "Drink up." So I will, Beth. I'll be enjoying that coffee, even though the money doesn't go to coffee, like I said. It goes to the podcast. And KFY donated and said, "Just found the German experience and enjoying it thoroughly. Next coffee is on me." Oh, thank you, KFY. So thank you very much to the supporters. And if you want to support, go to the link in the show notes or go to my website, thegermanyexperience.de/support. And if you want to help out in another way, as I always said, spread the word about the podcast. If you like it, just tell people about it. Share it on social media, tell your friends, and just let people know that this podcast exists. Now, I have got some very, very exciting news for you. And this is specifically for my listeners in Berlin. I will be recording a live episode of the Germany Experience in Berlin at PODFEST Berlin. This will be happening on Saturday, 16th of July, during the day sometime. I don't have a concrete time slot from the organizers just yet, but I will by next week, so you'll hear exactly what time I'll be on. But it will be, as I said, Saturday the 16th of July, and I'm guessing kind of afternoon sometime. Now, PODFEST Berlin is a weekend of live recordings, workshops, and celebrations, and it kind of is focused on the podcast community in Berlin. It's going to be happening at the Noisy Rooms at the House of Music, and that is in Revale Street. I will put the details in the show notes as well. And the episode that I will be recording there is going to be the Berlin episode, basically. I will be doing an episode that looks at life in Berlin for foreigners. I have some very special guests lined up, by the way. I have a panel of 4 guests, and I will tell you who they are next week. If you live in Berlin, come on by. Maybe you can even share some of your experiences of Berlin on the show. Now, early bird tickets are still available at the PODFEST website. If you want to buy a ticket, get in touch with me first, and I can get you 20% off the ticket price. So if you're interested in coming, contact me at info@thegermanyexperience.de or any of my social media accounts. You can find them all in the show notes or on my website. And get in touch. Tell me you want to get a ticket, and I can arrange for you to get 20% off your ticket. So that's PODFEST Berlin. It would be really cool if I could see my Berlin listeners at that event. It's going to be very cool. Before I move to the guest this week, I first want to tell you about next week's episode. Next week's episode is just going to be me answering some questions. I'm going to be doing a Q&A. So I would love to have your questions for me. Now, these questions could be about life in Germany, about a certain aspect of Germany, or about me personally. Anything you want, ask me a question, and I will see if I can answer it in next week's episode, which I think will probably be streaming live, but I will figure that out before next week and let you know. Send me your questions, info@thegermanyexperience.de, or like I said, any of my social media channels on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just find me and give me your questions. So let's get on to the topic, which is Probezeit. When you get a new job in Germany, you have a trial period of sometimes 3 months, but most often 6 months. Now, Lisa Janz is also known as Job Coach Germany. She's already been on the show a few times. And Lisa helps professionals to find a job in Germany and also gives career coaching. Her details are in the show notes. And she joins in this episode to talk about, as I said, the first 6 months in a new job. In last week's episode with Alex, we kind of touched on this topic. But in this episode, I go into a bit more detail with Lisa about what you can expect, what you should be asking yourself, what you should be asking of your employers. And I also talk about some of my own experiences that I've had with Probezeit in Germany. Here is Lisa Janz, Job Coach, Germany. Lisa, let's start off with, what do you think is the most important thing about that first 6 months that you're in the job?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting topic, and I'm excited to talk about that as well. And it's still to stay open-minded and not think that you are already at the finish line. With regards to your job application journey towards your dream job, towards your ideal job. And there are certain steps that you can take in between. So first of all, obviously, you should have designed or created a little overview for yourself, something like a vision board or just a piece of paper where you've written down how your ideal job looks like. So that is something that you have done prior to applying for a job, hopefully, so that you know, how do you want your life to look like? What is your life like outside of the job, and how important is your job for you right now? And then with regards to the job, what do you value the most and what don't you value so much with regards to your tasks and the activities, the people that are in your team, and basically which kind of job suits you?
Yeah.
And
I like that approach, because as we've said before, it's not going into a job blindly, which I think is a danger that a lot of expats will do. You're just desperate to maybe get a job in Germany, but it actually makes sense to, exactly like you said, and as we said in our previous episodes, really know what you're looking for and what your expectations are. And that, like I said, that is something we covered in a previous episode, which was very good. So that is linked there. And it's important, and that's something that you help people with as well if they want to get in touch with you, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's what I call the module of defining your ideal career. And when you know that, you have more clarity to move forward. You know exactly what kind of companies you want to look out for, what kind of jobs you are searching for, and also find out how you feel when you're reading a job ad, for example. But as you said, it's really dangerous, and it's not just for internationals who go into a job, but it's also for Germans who are searching for a job in Germany, that they are sometimes so desperate that they just take on any job so that they are not unemployed, for example. So, and just for a foreigner, for an international from outside, they just think, oh, this is just such a great opportunity to finally move to Germany. And I go there and then I start my job. And then it could happen in the first couple of days that you think, oh, no, that's not my thing. So there are a couple of steps that you can take, or questions that you can ask yourself to stay on track with your vision of what your ideal job looks like. And for the first, I would say the first 2 months, probably you are completely overwhelmed when you go to a new job, because you don't know what the processes are internally. So what I always suggest in the first week, when you're starting in your trial period, in your Probezeit, is that you have, of course, like a little notebook, and that you're taking lots of notes, and you take notes with about the task that you're doing. Obviously, if you have a person that is training you on the job, on like that's maybe a person that will retire or move to a different department, and they will show you that was previously my job and that's what you are supposed to be doing now. So that's obviously where you're taking lots of notes, but you should also take out some time in the evening maybe to recap what kind of people did you meet? How did they make you feel as well? So did you have a good feeling about them, or did they make you feel uncomfortable? How did they approach you?
So that's almost like a journaling approach, basically.
Yes.
It's like writing in a way, it doesn't have to be a full journal, but just some notes that go in a journaling direction where you can discuss with yourself, like how am I feeling? How was this? Okay, that's
exactly.
Cool. I like that.
And this journaling approach will help you also in the long run, because it's part of your networking in general. Because sometimes you meet people in the very beginning and then you don't are in touch with them anymore throughout your your daily business at your workplace, but then all of a sudden, maybe 3 years later, you have a project with them, and then somehow I've met this person before, and then you can take a look at your notes as well. Yeah. But first and foremost, it's important for you to find out, how am I invited into this company? Mm-hmm. Do I get a warm welcome? Does my boss introduce me to the team? Do I have to do that on my own? So, and here it's very individual, and it's up to you how you feel comfortable. So, do you like your boss to introduce you to the team, or is that something that you would do on your own? So, for example, just take a look at salespeople. They're normally very forward and out there, and they like to introduce themselves. So they just go out there and network naturally. That's their personality normally, and that's how they work. But for other people, let's say a little, just for me, for example, working in an HR department, I would really like my boss to introduce me to the team, so that I know, okay, who's responsible for which kind of task, and how can I approach the people, when can I approach the people, and just to have a warm welcome, not like a celebration party.
No,
but
some kind of welcome.
Yes, some kind of welcome.
And I think something like that is a good indicator as well. I mean, different companies will do it in different ways, but it's a good indicator if you feel like your new company has just kind of left you alone, not introduced you, not given you a good onboarding. That could also be alarm bells, because maybe there's some kind of indifference, or I don't know what. I had a similar thing at a company that I worked for. I started. The person who hired me left the company before I started. So I got hired. And then that person who had an idea of my role left the company, and I ended up with another manager who never hired me, but I was starting. And it was a really awkward situation. And in that situation, this woman also, I mean, it wasn't like she was horrible to me. She didn't have any bad feelings towards me. She just didn't bother about
She didn't
me.
know. And she didn't bother and didn't know what was going on.
And so I didn't have a proper onboarding. I wasn't introduced properly. Luckily, I'm sort of very outgoing, so I did introduce myself. But the problem was, I did know that already in the first 6 months. I did pick it up, but I didn't sort of worry. I kind of thought, okay, that's just the situation. But that became a problem a year down the line in my job. When I was there for a year, it became a problem because no one really knew what to do with me. So I was kind of an island on my own, and everything that I tried to do, I couldn't get budget for and everything. So in the end, I ended up leaving that company. But it was something that I could have noticed if I was listening to your advice, where you're saying, pay attention to, like, are they introducing you to the team, or is there a good onboarding in place? Because it could indicate problems.
Yes. Oh, and I'm so sorry that you had to go through an experience like that. But that's actually a very good point, that you can see it doesn't, it's not very obvious in the beginning, but it can be very difficult down the line, like 1 year later.
Exactly.
And that is something why it is important to actually focus on this trial period for yourself. Because what happens most of the time is you go into a job and you just think, okay, finally, I got this job. I have this contract, and now it's the trial period. So I shouldn't make any mistakes. I should really focus on doing my best and putting myself out there and just show the company that I'm the best fit for that company. But what people are missing out on is that the company has the same task in return. They have to do the same thing to you. So there are things that they promise you in the job interview. And that is something that you need to pay close attention to. Do they actually follow through with everything that they have promised you in the job interview? Yeah. And then it can happen. We never know how the economic situation is. There are certain circumstances that might happen sometimes. So the first question, when you have the feeling of something is not right, is that you need to ask yourself, is it just a phase because there's something going on outside that my bosses and the team and the company didn't expect, or is it permanent? Yeah. And very often our gut feeling will tell us it might be permanent. Yeah. And then you need to pay close attention. And here, my advice is always, the journey of reaching your dream job is not finished just because you have a contract. It is finished once you are in a seat where you feel satisfied. And that means that while you are in that trial period, you can still apply for other jobs. You can still go for other job interviews, and you can still find a better solution. Because the company that you go for knows that you're applying with other companies. And it happens sometimes, and I've seen that before with a previous colleague of mine, that she changed her job in the trial period 3 times. Yeah. 3 times. So she went to a job and then realized, okay, I don't really feel very comfortable here. She went to other job interviews, got a new job, was better. So the second job was better. Yeah. And then she got another invitation to another job interview. And then she went to that one. And now she has been there with them for 5 years.
Wow.
But obviously left the previous 2.
Yeah. And I think that's the important thing about the Probezeit. I like what you said about the company has to impress you as well. It's not just, it's a two-way road. You've got to show that you can bring value to the team, and that's a very important aspect of it. But the company also has to show you, like you said, that they follow through on their promises, that they take care of you. And it's an important time. And we're not saying, well, I don't know, maybe you are, but I guess what we're saying is you don't have to leave during your Probezeit, but become aware of these things. And a good thing to do would be to speak to your manager about them as well, to say, hey, this was what we discussed in the interview. And that's also a good indication to see how your manager would react to something like that, where you call them on something that they promised and hasn't happened, or, just to check that openness of communication. And maybe then you get things right. Maybe there was a misunderstanding somewhere, but that's also a big part of the trial period, is maybe just communicating with them as well.
Yeah. And that's very important. A very good point that you mentioned here. So sometimes what happens is that you get a 3 months trial period, so a 3 months Probezeit, but more general, I think that's the average is 6 months trial period. Yeah. And what you want to be doing is that you have regular kind of feedback sessions with your boss or with the manager that you have. You could also have feedback sessions with your team if that's more the setup of your workplace. Yeah. But that is when you can check in with your boss. So you should do that after 1.5 months, after 3 months, after 4.5 months, and then again after 6 months, because that's when the trial period is over. And in that checkup or in that feedback session, you can give your manager the feedback of what you expected and what you're not getting or what you're getting. So that the manager also knows, do you feel comfortable or not? But you also ask the manager whether what you are doing is what they are expecting. Right. Because that is something that could happen as well, that you are thinking, I'm doing such a good job, but actually the manager is expecting you to do something completely different. Yeah. And that could be that you're thinking that your everyday job is 80% working in the team and doing some tasks, and 20% just working on your own or going to meetings or something like that. Right. But then maybe the manager thinks, no, it's completely the opposite. It's the other way around. And that could happen, but they are not talking about that. And if you have regular checkups, then this can be avoided.
Yes, I think that's an important aspect, is to remain in constant communication. My very first job in Germany was I had a good experience with my trial period, because my manager was a strong believer there should be no surprises at the end of the 6-month period for both sides. So she was in constant contact with me every month. We had a checkup. It's not going to be like that at every company, but it's a good concept to have in mind, is that there shouldn't be a surprise. Like when you get to 3 months, you should have a good idea of what the company thinks of you, and they should have a good idea of what you can do already, and or you've at least discussed things where there might be disparities or things that are not lining up. But no surprises in that trial period is a good way of going through it. Yeah.
And that's good that your manager said that this is the goal for this trial period, that there are no surprises at the end, but that you already feel comfortable and know what you're doing, that you have your network in the company and know where you're heading to. So, and this should be for both sides. So from the company's expectation side as well as your expectations. Mm-hmm. And something that is very important to figure out in the first couple of months is something that is not communicated openly. So there are specific habits within a team that you only observe, that nobody is talking about. So something like, okay, so we actually have a time frame between 9:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon when you have to be there, but everything before that or after that is up to you. But now imagine your team always starts at 7 and you decide, no, I will just start at 9:30. I will then stay in later and have the same amount of time, but the team always starts at 7. Yeah. What do you think happens at that time? It's very dangerous what can happen there, because the frustration of the team will rise, but nobody will tell you. It could be that they tell you at some point, but this is something that you need to pick up as well without people actually telling you.
Yeah. It could be that they haven't communicated it, but they're getting frustrated with you. And that's a good point.
Or also something that I've come across, another example, that the team expects you to go for lunch with you. But somehow the entire arrangement, when you go to lunch together, it feels really stressful. So you don't feel relaxed, and you come home after work, you feel completely stressed out, and you probably are discussing it with your spouse, or you're even heated because you feel really uncomfortable. And that is something that could happen because the people that are going to the lunch break together, maybe they are gossiping or what, they have a certain, it could just be a tiny thing, such as they like to have the lights turned very low and another person likes to have the lights turned on very bright. And that could cause frustrations where you need to think about, okay, do I really want to use my spare time and have that lunch with a team? Is it really necessary to have that with a team? Also, you can communicate with a team. Is that something that is really important for the bonding or not? Is it okay if we find a compromise, such as 3 times a week I do lunch on my own and go for a walk, for example, and 2 days a week we can have lunch together? And you would not believe what like how amazing this process can be, that the team then realizes, oh, actually, we don't have to stick to that routine of going to lunch together every day. But that causes frustration if you do that on your own, just decide, oh, this is just awful, and you feel completely stressed out because that's your break and you're supposed to get a rest.
Yeah, it's such a good example, that what you've just given now, because there's a lot of different situations similar to that could be happening that you don't. I mean, this is not obviously not something that you can pick up in the interview process. There's just no way. No. Like even if you do a Schnuppertag where you're on site and doing, you're not going to pick up on these things, and it's the only thing that you pick up during this time. And I also like it because it's opening up lines of communication. You're discussing things with people and seeing how they react. And also just seeing if you're happy with that. If you really don't like it, that might be a factor. But it's also something that you now know, okay, if I do go through with this, then I know about it. It's in my mind. I've already seen, okay, this is something that I will have to live with. So it's a good thing to do during that period.
Yeah. So it's really important, basically, that you have this freedom of talking to your team and finding out, okay, what are these things that we all openly not talk about, but also think about, okay, how do I feel? Because that's where it starts. And sometimes you feel frustrated and you don't even know what it is about, but that's when you can ask yourself some questions. So what can I do with the situation that I feel uncomfortable with? What is this situation? So that you first define it for yourself. What is it actually that makes me uncomfortable? Is it the task? Is it the manager? Is it the team, the people, or the setup with the manager, or the setup just you with another department? So you need to find out what is the situation that makes you feel uncomfortable. And then you can think about, okay, how can I communicate that? How can I influence the situation to make it better?
Yeah.
So that's basically something that you need to keep in mind. It's always up to you, as long as you know what you want, as long as you know, do I feel comfortable or do I not feel comfortable? And when you then feel you're not comfortable anymore, and to the point that it's definitely not the right fit, so that you know, okay, I definitely have to change, and that's the only solution to this process, then you can do that anytime. You can still do that after the trial period, but it's easier for the entire situation if you leave the company within the trial period.
Yeah, it's way easier because, of course, during the trial period, you have a shorter notice period. So I think it's a few weeks where you can say, all right, this is not working out. And within 2 weeks or whatever the agreement is, you're gone, or the company can say it to you within 2 weeks, this is not working out. It's really an ideal time to do it. because once your trial period is over, sometimes you have notice periods of 3 months, could be even more. I don't know what the standards for the contracts are, but it becomes a lot more complicated and difficult to do. Yeah. And this is something as well, coming back to last week's episode with Alex, something that she did. She was in one of her jobs, and she said she realized almost immediately that this wasn't the kind of thing that she wanted to be in. And she decided to get out of it. But then, of course, the thing that might be in a foreigner's mind is, especially if it's your first job in Germany, how will this look on the at the next step?
Yeah. And that's a typical question that everybody deals with. It's something that is stuck in your head, and then it makes you not wanting to sleep.
Yeah. So like, how's a future employer going to look at this? Like, I was at a job and I left after 2 months during the trial period.
Yeah. And it's also very typical in Germany as well, I think, because the loyalty that employees have with their companies is very huge. The average person in Germany sticks with their job for 10 years normally. So that's one. Yes. And it's really, I mean, it's changing now. It has been changing the last 3 years. Obviously, this is changing up. But just imagine that. And I know lots and lots of people, also coachees of mine, who have been in their previous job for 20 years. And it's just like, that's just really, I mean, it's great that if you feel comfortable there. Yeah. But at some point, what is very important always in your job is that you develop and that you don't feel bored. And if you stick with a job for 20 years, the company has to put in a lot of effort for you to stay. So that is their task. And if they cannot do that, then obviously you can leave. And with Alex, for example, that you have that on your mind. What is the other company thinking about? Nowadays, it's a lot easier because companies are actually looking for staff, and a lot of people are changing around. The job market is really, in flow, I would say. Like, everybody's moving around.
So companies,
and companies are aware of that fact, and they are just simply happy if they have applicants as well. But still, there are a lot of conservative companies, I would call them, who still have their processes in place where you have to apply, and it takes weeks, sometimes months, to get the job there. Yeah. So for them, obviously, they will ask you that question. Why did you leave that early? Why are you not staying with that company? And then you can simply say the truth and tell them. So what you need to be aware of, don't ever gossip about your previous employer. None. If you had bad situations, that's okay. But what you can communicate is that there were expectations on your end, and that's what the company promised you, but they didn't fulfill it. Yeah. Or as well, if you have a feeling, and that could be that you go into a company and they do everything. It seems like they are the best company. They have an inclusion and diversity department, for example, where they also pay attention to including all sorts of people with different backgrounds. But what happens, for example, if you are the only person that is not from Germany?
Yeah.
And that happens. And then it feels maybe really weird. It's really difficult. The company can do so many things, but if you go in there and just feel like, oh no, it really feels, it's really, and you don't want to go to the job like with a lot of tension inside of you. You are spending so much time there, and then it's not even the company. Just be open. You can discuss that with the company, communicate. I'm so sorry. I know that you're doing everything that you can, but unfortunately, I just simply don't feel like I belong here. Yeah. And if the employer is a good employer, they will understand. They will agree and help you even to find a better fit for yourself. They don't want to drag you down and just make you suffer if they are a good employer. And if they make a fuss and start yelling or screaming, then obviously it's not the right employer. No. And then you should leave as soon as possible. And that's what you can communicate in your new job interview. If they are asking, why do you want to leave after 2 weeks? Why do you want to leave after 1 month, for example? You just tell them there were different expectations, or that was the situation. As long as you don't gossip, everything is fine.
Yeah, and I think that that was the thing that came out with Alex as well, is that it's a good chance to be honest in your interview about what happened in your previous job, about why your expectations were not met, and I think it does open up a good opportunity for you to. Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing if you left. In fact, it's definitely not a bad thing if you leave during your trial period. It can only be good for you, because obviously things are very wrong in the job, and it's not necessarily going to have a make a problem for you going forward, because you will be, as long as you're honest with what was happening.
Yeah. And what is very, very important is that point when Alex felt from the very beginning that this is not the right company for me. This is not the right team, not the right place for me, that you are not harsh with yourself, but that you understand, okay, this is how I feel, and it's totally okay that I feel that way, but I need to figure out why I feel this way. Yeah. So figure out what are the circumstances, the people, the way how they interact with me, and also find out how can I make sure that this doesn't happen to me in the next company.
Yeah. I really liked what you said there about not being harsh with yourself, and I think that's something I just want to focus on now for a second. And it's another important thing to remember for your for the trial period, is that if things are going wrong, it's very easy for you to think it's me. I don't get along with Germans, or I'm not smart enough for this job, or I'm I've obviously messed up because things not going. But sometimes it's just not a good fit, and almost always it's not you. It's just about finding the right place for you, the right place. And I think that what you said, don't be harsh with yourself, is very, very good advice. Don't be harsh with yourself if it's not working out. Be honest with yourself. Realize that you need to find something else, and go easy on yourself. You're figuring it out as you go along as well. And I think that's important advice. And I think that's also where having someone like you, Lisa, as a career coach can help, because they might not have those what did you call them? The boards, the mind boards, or the
vision board.
The vision board. Thank you. They might not have those vision boards or whatever. And those are important things to have. So you remember your values, you remember what's important to you, and you can have a more realistic view of what's happening.
Yeah. And it's also something that you said with not being harsh with yourself, and that you're questioning, is it the Germans? Is it me? So that you always put the blame, you're blaming yourself, and that could cause, it can have such a massive ripple effect that it might cause you to have a culture shock and think about, I don't want to stay here in Germany anymore. Yeah. And then you leave. And then your dream of being in Germany and having a beautiful life here may crumble very easily, just because of this one tiny thing, that one part of your life, which is very important, because you spend so much time at your work life. And if you don't feel satisfied there, then you always think there's something wrong. But I think it's a human thing that we always blame ourselves. But as I said before, and as you agreed as well, we shouldn't blame ourselves. We should think, okay, no, this is happening. And of course, it's a really difficult situation, but let's tackle that problem. Let's find out a solution. And you can always learn something from that. Just because that company wasn't the right fit doesn't mean that the next company, maybe that's even better. And you already got the first impression of Germans, how they work, or your German employer, and you found out, okay, that's something that I don't want anymore. And that is something good. And I mean, that is something I remember when I first thought about in high school, when I was, I think, 16 and was going to an internship. And then I thought, okay, what do I want to be when I'm older, when I grow up? And I basically had a list, and I just crossed everything that I didn't want. And then from there, I just tried it out. And it's just simply trial and error. And nothing is wrong with that. Yeah. You just need to think of including more fun and more joy in your work life, because you spend so much time there. So why spend 8 hours a day when you feel tensed and really dissatisfied?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And even if you spend 4 months or 3 months at a company and you end it because it's not working out during that time, then it's like you said, it's something that you've learned, something that you figured out about yourself. Like, why didn't I like that? What went wrong? And, what does that mean for me going forward? And it also applies if the company ends it with you, that don't be harsh. You do need to look at the reasons and try and internalize and maybe figure out, okay, what's the lesson here? Is it something that I need to look at myself? But also don't be harsh with yourself if the end comes, or if the termination comes from the company side as well, because it could also be that you're just not a good fit for them either. So
yes.
that
they had different expectations, or that they thought they were looking for a person with your qualification, but actually they need completely something else. And that happens as well, that the company makes mistakes and doesn't really know whom to recruit.
Yeah. So in that case as well, don't be harsh with yourself. It does not necessarily mean you're not a fit for working in Germany, or you're not you're not enough or whatever. It doesn't mean any of that. It's just that fit maybe wasn't right.
Yeah, exactly. And also these questions that you ask yourself, how do I feel like after 3 months at least, and 6 months, you can, I always have a great tip that I share with my coachees, is send yourself a future email. So there is a lot of software out there where you can just simply use on the internet for free, sending yourself a future email just with these questions. How do I feel? Is this job still meeting my expectations? And how do I envision the next 2 years maybe in my job? And is that still in alignment with what I'm currently doing? Yeah. And you can send yourself these emails over and over again, just to have a reminder. You could also have a reminder in your calendar, for example.
Yeah.
But you need to take that time, and it can be just 10 minutes, but that will give you a feeling of, yes, I'm still on the right track, or maybe I can change something here. Yeah. And that's also when this is some sort of precautionary tasks that you're doing, that you don't get to that frustration point, but that you realize earlier on, okay, now is the time that I want to have more development. I want to have a course, or I want to have a Schnuppertag in a different department, for example. That could be it. Yeah. But as you mentioned before, if people don't want to do that on their own, that's what job coaches like me are here for. So that I support them along the process, because it can be very overwhelming and people still blame themselves. And then it's very helpful to have a coach on their side that just, is your accountability partner. I hold the space. I'm also kind of like give you my shoulder so that you can just process that information that is going on in your head.
Yeah, I think, like you said earlier, it's a very overwhelming time. It's a very difficult time, and it's good to have some kind of person that you can go through it with, and just have maybe get some context or some reality checks from during that process. So anything else about the trial period that you want to mention?
No, that's actually it. We've covered it all. So take notes in the beginning and ask yourself on a regular basis whether you still feel comfortable and what needs to change in order to feel comfortable. And then obviously the biggest thing that you need to keep in mind, don't be harsh on yourself if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to say that it's not working out and change. Because that's a big it could be a big problem in your mind that that's stopping you from making a change. But if it's not working out for you, you need to decide, is this something that I can reconcile or not? And if not, then move on and look for another
possibility. And here it's very important that you have a good network at home as well. So whether you are talking to your family or you also have friends, also maybe meetup groups here in Germany, so that you can talk to someone who can also give you a reflection. Is that a German thing? And that's just the way how they are, but don't take it personally. Or that is very important, because a German cannot tell you, that's the way how we work. We sometimes don't know how we work.
Exactly. Exactly. And of course, we mentioned all of this stuff during the trial period, or the Probezeit, but it also applies for afterwards. We're not like you absolutely can make changes once you're in. It's not the end of the world. If you decide during your Probezeit, okay, I know about these issues, I'm still going to give it a try or whatever, then sure, then that's that's also okay. It just becomes a little more tricky. To change once you've got the full contract going and everything. And I think my biggest thing is the communication during that trial period. Communicate with your team members, communicate with your manager, learn as much as you can about the situation you're going to be in that job, and try and get as much information to make, because you're still decision making in that 6 months. I view it as an extended interview process, essentially, because you're still making a decision.
Yes, exactly. And that's also very important. Sometimes in the beginning, you feel so excited. Everything's great. And then it starts crumbling. But as you said, the communication with the team or with the manager will show you whether there is an open-minded culture in the company. When you could see, for example, if the manager always postpones your feedback sessions, it's not a good sign. If you want to have that feedback session. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. Communication is key.
Communication is key. Exactly. For everything, not just jobs.
Yes, exactly.
Lisa, it is, as always, very insightful. I feel like I learn a lot from you when we're talking. Whenever I need career advice, I'm just going to book you to come on my podcast.
Yes. Oh, I'd love that. I mean, I'm always happy to be on your podcast and help as many people as possible.
Yes. And I always get such great feedback when you're on. So I really appreciate it. You've got a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight. And thank you for giving up your time to be on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me as a guest. It's always a pleasure.
That's it for this week. Don't forget to send me your questions so that I can answer them in the Q&A episode next week. Check out the show notes for all the links that you need for PodFest Berlin and the other things that I've spoken about in this episode. And yeah, that's it. Music in this episode by my band, 10 Cent Chains. Additional music by Ryan Anderson. Until the end, Auf Wiederhören.